Welcome to MSP Unplugged. I'm your host, Paco Lebron. This is the place to learn how to run your MSP, whether you're a nimble MSP or leading a team for the journey. This is the place for you. Ahoy, everybody. We are in week 2 in January. By the time you'll hear this, it'll be week 3. Hope it was a successful one for yourself. No tip, trick, or story for this week. It's been one of those weeks, as you all probably can relate. I do actually have a story, or I guess an announcement that was reached out to. I think, from us discussing, and this was actually announced earlier today, for all of those that are using the Unify equipment, I think that there has been a lot of back and forth on, can this solution be scaled out in not only a SMB or small business attributes or applications, but also can it be scaled enterprise? And you're often treated with this kind of this perspective of it's prosumer. It's really a retail product or consumer product that's trying to dive into the enterprise space, which if you look at the website, you can tell they have enterprise gear. There's enterprise people that are actually working on this. It actually was an enterprise technology that scaled down. But one of my big complaints from transitioning from our previous network, which you all know who that is, I won't bash them anymore. But the point is that, we transitioned to this new set of equipment, and we went into Unify. We are all inside the Ubiquity environment. But my biggest complaint is that there is no zero touch infrastructure, meaning that you can program it all in the dashboard, drop ship all the equipment out, and you just have an engineer or a boots on the ground, plug it in, and you're good to go. Well, they just announced this morning that they just, for Unify Fabrics is the name of the technology that they are allowing. Now in the site manager, you're able to do all your configurations, all your setups. Just have to go ahead and plug in the serial numbers. I think there's some more details to it as well. We'll have the links in the show notes, but now you can pre-configure all of your equipment prior to you dropping it off to a site. What I can tell you is that that's going to save the amount of time that it takes for a network or an equipment to get to a client site. And for those that have been diehard Ubiquity fans, hopefully that is some good news for you as you go through for your zero touch and scaling of your networks with the Ubiquity equipment. So I thought that was pretty cool for this morning. But without that, I want to go ahead and introduce our guest for this episode. I'm super excited. I've talked about this gentleman for many other podcasts. He is a gentleman that has joined me in this endeavor that is known as MSP Owners Group. He is his company and his MSP joined us back in June, along with Prodigy Techs, to be acquired by MSP Owners Group. This gentleman I gotten to know let me rephrase, got to know him very well, very fond of the gentleman. I mean, he's another brother from another mother. You could just tell from the way of the synergies that we've had over the last several months. And again, mind you, we just met this past June, but it feels like I've known him for quite some time, probably in another lifetime. But this gentleman who I'm referring to is Chris Cool, the founder and CEO of Cool Technology Group down in Houston. Chris, how you doing today?
My brother Paco, doing excellent. Thank you so much. Awesome, thanks for having me.
No, I appreciate it. Again, I've been talking about you for here on the episodes the last several weeks. Everyone's always telling me, when are we going to talk to and see Mr. Chris Cool? And all I had to tell him is that there's going to be one phrase and one phrase only that you will get from this episode that we record. And that's going to be sell more copiers. And so that is an inside joke that me and Chris have. When we were down in, I believe it was Exchange in November.
Yep.
Or August, September, I can't remember. It's all a blur for me right now, but it was Exchange Next Gen. Chris came down with his CIO, Anthony Herrera. We had a great time, and we were meeting with a bunch of other MSPs. And as Chris will dive into some of his history, he will tell you kind of his phrase and why that's been a synonymous phrase that he's been using nowadays. But Chris, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about yourself, give yourself a little bit of an intro, and kind of how you found yourself here to the space.
Yeah. So born and raised in Colorado. I'm a Colorado kid, and had a lovely childhood there. Went through that world and actually got a ski scholarship and started my first college career at Colorado Mountain College. I lasted about a year in Steamboat, and then it was time. I went to the University of Colorado and and graduated from the University of Colorado and found my way to Texas via a client in the technology space. And so here I am today, married and have 2 beautiful children. My son just got accepted to Texas A&M. He just started his first semester there, and I have a beautiful 16-year-old daughter, Shelby, who is out there crushing it in the Texas country. She's a pig farmer. We've got a pig that she's raising, which has been an interesting experience. The notorious PIG. So it's been fun.
Did I just hear you say that the pig's name is Notorious PIG?
The Notorious PIG. The hardest part about Notorious PIG is his fate is sealed. She's doing FFA, and we're coming up to the auction. So they auction them off, and it's must go to the processor. So we're going through some interesting times.
It's funny because I think we've talked about this in the past too, where my wife wants to raise a baby pig, call him Wilbur, raise him till he's fat and plump, and then go ahead and eat him. And so I just don't understand the concept of that. Well, like, you can raise it, sure, in the farm life, but like, you can't raise it as a pet. And her justification is it's going to be so loved that it's going to taste delicious. So that tells you the perspective of what's going on here in the Lebron household. But but you and again, I feel your pain. I have a 15-year-old going on 16 here in April. Right before the show, she actually just got texted me right now and said, "Hey, I'm actually going to interview for a job. Do you have any advice?" And so kind of told her, I was like, "Well, where are you going, first of all?" And so it's a restaurant for a server job. And I was like, "All right, cool. Fast food, good customer service. Here's some advice that you can go from there." And all she said was, "Wow, you were actually really smart." And so I guess that's
it's amazing if they look at us like we know what we're doing.
Right, instead of just good old dad. But anyway, going back into that, I mean, you mentioned quite a bit of transition, right? And you've gone from Colorado to Texas, career move and things of that nature. You kind of started into. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you kind of got into the tech space, right? Because I know you've jumped around a little bit in there, but there's a phrase you like to use that I hear, and I love when you say it every time, and kind of dive in and talk a little bit more about that world, and what kind of drove you into supporting and being sales and kind of going into that realm.
Yeah. So it's a really cool story. After college, I went to the mountains and moved back to the mountains of Colorado, Telluride actually, and lived the ski bum life, and was a bartender like your daughter and a server and everything you could possibly do. But I also fell into guiding fly fishing. So I was a fly fishing guide, professional guide, traveled all over the world, fly fishing, and it was an amazing thing. And I had a client, interestingly enough, a phenomenal gentleman who was my mentor. His name was Dennis Gonier. And Dennis actually lived in Dallas. And so he would come up and go fish with me. I taught him how to ski. I taught his whole family how to fish and camp and be in the outdoors. And he said, look, one day we were on the river and he said, "Hey, Chris, how long are you going to do this for?" And I said, "Oh, I have ambition too." It was very interesting being a guide when you're on the other side and everybody thinks it's such a fabulous life, but you're really working hard, but you're taking a lot of business people and entrepreneurs that are doing well in life and achieving things. And so naturally, that's just instinctually in me. And he says to me, "Well, if you ever think about doing anything else," actually, he said this. He said, "Chris, if you ever get in trouble or you ever want to grow up, I think you make a good salesman." And I said, "Oh, thanks, Dennis. I appreciate it." So we chatted more, and sure enough, not too long after it, as God would have it, I needed both of those things. And so I called him on October 13th, and I was in Dallas on October 16th with a duffel bag, a blue sports coat, a pair of khakis, and a pair of loafers. What I found out more when I got there was he was actually this was in the late 90s. So this was the beginning of the digital world, right? The little old company called AOL was the precursor. Well, he had an online marketing firm that was actually in when I got there. He was in the midst of a merger, and he became one of the executives, number 3 guy of AOL. And so consequently, that left me. I was only there in Dallas 3 months, and then I found myself without an opportunity. So I went out and I fell into the telecom space, started to have good success, good traction after a couple months, fell into the telecom space and got hired on by a company called Intermedia Communications based out of Tampa. And I started just as an account executive, started selling local and long distance. As God blessed me, I went through that process and I advanced extremely quick. I think within 18 months, maybe even less than that, 18 months, I went from an account executive all the way up to my next move, which was going to be senior vice president of the West Coast. Now, I was in Dallas, and they gave me two choices. They gave me a choice to go to Chicago and run the East Coast and or go to Houston and run the West Coast. So I went and visited your fair city of Chicago, and I didn't quite fit in there.
Okay.
It wasn't my jam. As a matter of fact, I got escorted out of my first two appointments. So I didn't. That was the way of finding out I needed to be based, I guess, out of Houston. So I came to Houston, and man, it was an incredible thing. That's really how I got transitioned from sales into management. And then, of course, in that process, you unlike you, where you're extremely smart and technical, I'm just on the other side. So more vision, more visionary, sales, so on and so forth. So I think that transition was pretty neat. I ran the shared services division. So we would go in and light up this was pre-voice over IP. We'd light up the building, give them internet and phones for all the very large buildings in all the major cities. And so it was a phenomenal exposure for me. I've traveled the whole West Coast and experienced a lot of different people and a lot of different teams that were functioning under the same umbrella, but going in different directions. So it was phenomenal. So that's really how I got into the tech space.
Gotcha. Now, obviously, you've gone into and talked a little bit more on, going into telecoms, and then, ultimately, my favorite thing you always mention is not only, so there's two phrases that you tend to use a lot, and you haven't said them yet. So I'm trying to guide you through so I can get you to say those two phrases. But, as you kind of went through intermedia and those communications, did you notice kind of a difference at that time between what the telecommunication industry was doing and the IT industry? Were they so different from each other where one was preferred than the other? Or was it more of a choice that you kind of had to pick one lane or the other before diving into whatever those technologies, whatever the way they were sold, easier to sell one than the other? Can you tell me a little bit about how that was back then on just trying to get into those spaces?
And I think that it's very similar to what it is today. I mean, obviously, because my brain was from the other side, I stayed on the other side, but I saw what it was. And in the technology space, still to this day, right? You find the different providers of where they are, so you see through that lens, and have the ability to choose which direction you want to go. But I always tended to stay. Now, the next part of my life, where we're getting into one of my phrases, right? So. Mm-hmm. So the next phase, that company was sold, and then to a very, very large organization that consequently went out of business. And so I was stuck standing there with this great resume and worthless stock. And I had another friend, interestingly enough, that I played a lot of golf with, and he said, "Man, I think you'd make a great sales guy." And I was like, "Huh, I've heard that before." I said, "Well, in what space?" And he said, "Copiers." And I said, "Really?" So, and unfortunately, I think the biggest challenge in that space is I grew so fast and I was so young. I was in my mid to early 20s, and I had a lot of responsibility, and so I was a little blind to what the real world was like. So it was a big step, a big humble pie for me to jump into the copier business, but very grateful for that. Firm here in Houston, and so I went from a senior vice president with a corner office to I've got to make 100 cold calls a day, right? But what was really amazing is the gentleman that I fell up underneath out of Brooklyn. He's like, I went to him after 3 months, and I was like, I'm not going to make it. He's like, you'll make it. He goes, "This is what you need to do." And this is really what clicked in my DNA. because you have to do this amount of business, and it's all about numbers, right? You have to do X amount of business, and you have to go do this many calls, and you have to do this many deals, and it's all about the numbers. And here's what exactly the routine you need to make. Well, it clicked to me what I needed to do and how to focus to get to my financial goals, to get to where it was. I also, at this time, got married. So that's a whole new set of rules, right? And so I quickly adapted to that. And eventually, and the model was come in, sell, and selling copiers was the game. So it was all about the game, and the game in selling copiers, and then hardware as a service, right? So that's where all of that clicked for me. Now, I still, early in that career, in the copier industry, I was sitting at a lounge one evening with some fellow salesmen, and we started brainstorming, and we were like, hey, look, you're selling telecom, you're selling IT, we're selling this. And I said, we came up with an idea. Well, why don't we combine our forces and go in and look at these small to medium businesses and do one evaluation, but bring them a total solution, right? A one-stop shop. So that was 2004, and I formed what was called the beginning of how I've evolved into where I'm at, the Bottom Line.
Gotcha.
And so what the Bottom Line did is we would go into small to medium businesses and do an evaluation of their whole organization. And then hardware as a service came into play, and it was all because I was always on my buddies like, we need to sell more copiers. They're like, we need to sell more telecom. We need to be doing so. That evolved. I went to my CEO as I got promoted to vice president of this organization, and I said, hey, would you like to get into this business? I think we could have some other revenue sources. He was smart. I learned a big lesson in this statement. He said, no, I focus on this one industry, and that's what I focus on, and that's it. I learned a great lesson from that. And then consequently, so he said, well, as long as you keep doing your responsibilities and keep producing and selling copiers at the rate you were, I think I was ranked number 3 in the United States at that time. So we were doing pretty well.
So it's amazing, right? So there's a couple of things, right? One, I love that hey, we're focusing on one particular niche, one particular area. This is my bread and butter. This is what I'm good at. This is what I want to focus at, right? And diving into the fact that you had assembled a collective to hit each individual industry that maybe you just either A, didn't have the bandwidth to go into, or B, no desire to learn that other side of the business because you wanted to focus on what you were good at, right? Or at least that's the advice that was given. And I think that goes into a lot of the conversations that you have nowadays, right? I think you go into a vendor hall and you go or at an event, or you go to a lunch and learn, and you see all the nice widgets, and it's like, this widget will be a great new line of business for you. It's going to bring you a ton of money, right? I used to get that a lot with VoIP. I used to get that a lot with printers and copiers. And so me at the time, it's like, well, I run an IT firm. I want to dial it in. I want to focus on this because I don't even know if I've even really focused and fine-tuned the whole thing to make it as profitable as possible to move on to a whole nother line of business, right? Yep. Even down to, mobility solutions and things of that nature. And so having that ability to understand, all right, I'm going to stay narrow and focused, in my opinion, the payout will be so much more great on that avenue, unless, again, you find other partners or you find others that could be an extension to you to help contribute that if you don't have the resources. Now, the second piece to it is obviously now that we are all part of this same umbrella and the same family, right? And we'll get into cool in a second, because I have to ask you, coming around January 2020, when the whole world just like flipped right upside down, CTG came to be, right? So yeah. I'm fast tracking it a little bit, but so again, as you mentioned, I'm an engineer at heart, turned business owner, had to understand that level of mind switch of running a business versus as a technical person, just providing services. And so, I thought I knew what I knew from my side. Then talking to you, printer in your blood and all this other, printer toner in your blood, and understanding
toner in your blood, brother, toner in your blood,
toner in your blood. And so, just understanding that whole other world of why it made me aware of two things. One, how you're not the traditional copier, previously the copier business moving into IT services, because you understood how they both can mingle with each other. Because there are other brands that we won't mention here that are huge players and just thought that managed services was a cog in the wheel.
Yep.
And it was just going to be a widget to sell. And you can tell from, at least in my opinion, from those that I've taken over from them, there was no attention to detail or really any effort to understand how that whole universe worked, right?
That's correct.
The second piece to it is it showed me that, again, there's a stigma in MSPs in the IT industry of a printer copier business moving into MSP services, right? That don't understand. And so now it allowed me to understand, okay, now I understand why they want to move into this realm, right? Because of this term MRR, monthly recurring revenue, understanding that there's more profitability and margins inside of MSP services versus printer. But there's still such a vast world in the printer copier world that we're not even tapping, that actually influenced a lot of the things that we have right now. Hardware as a service, disaster recovery as a service, all of these, from what I've hearing and learning, came from this specific world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you were kind of early on adopting a lot of these things. And what I can tell you is that things that we've adopted now at Prodigy Techs, and then ultimately for MSP Owners Group, has been from us having those conversations and you understanding that world in such detail. So for that, one, thank you for a lot of that type of knowledge. And two, it's just been damn fun the last 6 months for a lot of the things here. But going back to CTG, right? And fast forwarding from where you are, obviously you've sold a few businesses, you come into 2020. What led you to form another business, let alone an MSP that offered both all three actually, or all the services, a full-fledged IT firm that was edge to edge from cloud to keyboard, helping those small businesses? Can you tell me a little bit about like what was the eureka that came to, hey, what?
Yeah. Well, it's really cool hearing you say, really cool kind of you recapping that, right? So it goes back to, then I left the copier industry, or I left that particular place. And I was looking for my next adventure, and I really saw the change when we moved from the analog to the digital world. Like I saw that happening. And because I was in the copier business, I saw that copier people were trying to now be IT people, the big monster players, right? But they were failing miserably, right? But I saw Konica Minolta then acquire a very large MSP, right? Trying to meld them, but their service was horrendous, right? Because they were doing it at a big level, so it was broken. So I saw this. And being unlike an engineer mind, I was like, how can I bring this all together? So I teamed up with a very smart IT person and another copier guy. And we formed another business. I brought in the telecom division. But the key for us was and he was still old school IT, right? React, diagnose the problem, fix it, change, you're reactionary, right? And I was like, look, we've got to find a help desk where we're not staffing all of these people, and where can we go? So I found, of all things, AVG was and then AVG was acquired by Avast, and then consequently Avast was acquired by Barracuda. Well, all of a sudden, all of these things came into play, and I saw the vision. And so we took that company, built that company up, sold that off. I found another copier company that didn't have an IT company. The cool part about that world is it was a mom and pop, but they have a standing client list that need help. But you got a copier person. So fast forward, transition, we built that company up and sold that one. And had some ethical maneuvering going on with partners. That was a life lesson. And I took that summer off of 2019. I took my family back to Colorado, and we got back to Texas, and I started getting nervous and trying to figure out what my next move was. And I'm sitting on the back porch with my wife, and she said, honey, it's time. It's time for you. You've done this. Go do this. That was September 1st. I launched Cool Tech the next day, September 2nd, not having any clue whatsoever. A prayer, determination and a supportive family. And consequently, my first thing was I knew how to put together the program now. I had the bottom line. I knew what that evaluation would look like, right? So the next move was, I've got to find a smart person. So I prayed about that. My first meeting the next day, I got up at a group and I said, hey, look, I've launched Cool Technology Group. I'm looking for some individuals, some engineers, some people that understand this side of it. One of my buddies who sells alarms and phone systems in the back raised his hand, said, talk to me afterwards. Fast forward, I met Anthony, my partner and CIO, the next day. And it took me about 2 months. That was September. We did our first deal in November. He was with another firm doing the traditional IT. And when I explained to him what I was about to do, set aside all of this, these are the services, and they're going to pay a monthly fee and tack on hardware as a service, tack on telecom, tack on all these other revenue sources. He still didn't believe it. It took me another month, but he saw me sell 2 deals, that deal and then one other deal. And then consequently, Cool Technology was born, and we've been evolving since.
Nice. Very awesome. Now, you had mentioned there's a couple things on that one, right? So
Yep.
Being able to find someone and really just starting off with the hopes and dreams, right? And hoping that it was going to get in, and praying, and ensuring hopefully that, putting it out there and it's going to come back to you. And, the Lord delivered and was able to give you to Anthony. And obviously I've worked with Anthony plenty of times, and a great aspect on that. And really just diving into getting back into it, right? Now, you mentioned this happened around September, right? And then around November is when you close the deals. Obviously in March, the whole world just went crazy and upside down. So for me, my transition was from 2013 to 2017, or I'm sorry, from 2013 to May of 2020. It was just me. I was the one running it myself. I did it myself. I went from break fix to managed services. And so when the world turned upside down for me, everyone going remote, I ended up having to expand my options. So I ended up finding Rosa, being able to get build out my help desk at the time in Venezuela, and growing into that because I had to. That was just the demand during that time. I'm just curious on how was your experience during that time, and how did it sway? Did it sway you in one way or the other? And I'm curious on what direction to kind of move forward from when all that happened.
Yeah, actually, it was another blessing for us. In Anthony's attitude, and much the same. So that was November, right? And so fast forward, I closed those 2 deals. Then I quickly closed a couple more anchor tenants. So when that all hit, all of a sudden, then we took them because we were necessary, right? So we never missed a beat. And so we consequently took our anchor clients that we had and took them remote, right? Or flexed. And because of the way our system is set up, we were able to do that. It didn't matter where they were physically, right? And so it actually enhanced our business. And then through referral in that time frame for those couple of years, we actually probably saw our best growth because people were really recognizing. Oftentimes I find in this world, it's interesting that I'm in this business, you're kind of a hidden scene until you're not, right? And then the world's on fire, right? And everybody's going in different directions. But because we had processes and procedures in place, it was an easy recommendation. So it really, as I look back, it was challenging. It was rough, but it allowed for us to flex and further lean into our offerings, which consequently has now brought us to this point today where you and I have been blessed to fall up underneath this new scene and what that looked like. So it was a blessing. And I also saw my offerings change. I saw the writing on the wall with one of my providers. We won't mention any names. And so I went direct to the players that are out there and really fine tune my machine so that I could make it repeatable. And we've maintained minimal staff, but can deliver service excellence with Fortune 100 companies.
That's awesome. It's funny because that phrasing, right, and being able to provide, because again, for my sales acumen, I had to go through several workshops, intensives, learn from a good friend of mine, Victor Antonio, who's a sales entrepreneur and sales guru, that he does his own thing, and speaking and all that sort of deal. So that's how I kind of gravitated toward and understanding sales, going from a technical mind to a business owner with a sales mentality. But I've had plenty of oh no moments, right? And I was like,
Yes.
oh man. And so, what was one hurdle that you can share that was like either that you were either hit with, or in regards to kind of just trying to start off new with CTG, in regards to um trying to stand out, and maybe there was some, as far as in a crowded market, you found some success in either a partnership or a way of saying, hey, we're in Houston, but like you said, with your phrasing, being able to provide Fortune 100 service, was that a phrase that always followed you from the beginning, or was an aha moment that allowed you to communicate that, and that's how you started getting people interested? Can you share a little bit about kind of how you kind of ran through? Because again, starting off is always hard, right? And for those that are listening,
Brutal.
they're either early in their journey or they're trying to stabilize. What were some of those things that you tried to kind of get over that hurdle of trying to get that cash flow in initially, and really just to get more in the door? Or what were some of the things you were doing to just drum up business?
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of goes back to the DNA, unfortunately, of how I've evolved through in the business world, right? It always goes back to and really to the vision of the bottom line, where we were creating something. And so when I knew that I had, and also that I'd gone through 4 different MSPs, 2 different copier companies, right? And so taking and trying to absorb of the wins and obviously the losses, right? And so I think it was a mindset coming in, and also surrounding myself with the old phrase, surrounding myself with people that are much smarter than myself. And that lent itself even to where I am today and where we're evolving as an organization. And so I think that was the biggest thing. And I think also it's just a matter of being brave and going out and boldly going where you haven't gone before, right? And knowing that goes back to my wife. It goes back to my wife having confidence in me that I had done this and been extremely successful. And people want to help people. I mean, the reality is if you're trying to deliver service excellence and you're standing on your moral compass in the right direction, you're going to have success. It's when you go in the other direction. And also that kind of is why I'm here today. I had to make the hardest decision in my life twice because of ethical scenarios that I was involved in. And that gave me the confidence then to go out on my own and continue to press in. And it's a matter of, it's just fighting. Everybody fights. You're going to lose. You're going to make the wrong mistakes. You're going to fall down, but you just got to get back up.
Yeah. No, yeah, same. I mean, I think there's so many stories and unsaid stories of those that have gone through and they're in the mud and they're trying to find out from there, down to myself, 2 years full time, and everyone has heard this story who are tuning in, but really diving in. It was a bad accident on a job site that almost made me just decide, you know what, I'm out. This is it. I'm quitting. And it wasn't even the job site accident that caused me to really quit, but it was the fact of a responsibility I had later in that day and completely forgetting about it. Right. And so that was what really took the toll on me. And that was a 2018. Yeah, 2018 Labor Day weekend. And so I just remember it was a good conversation with my good friend John Dubinsky, for those that know, formerly of the Maven Group. And he said, hey, unplug, shut it off, and worry about it until you come back on that Tuesday. And so it truly is about the mindset, right? And really making sure that you are strong mentally, or at least trying to find as much support and the ability to pour in. And for me, it was really much of like 3 small changes that I made, which was stop charging like I'm these enterprise clients. I'm not a bank, charge monthly. As we talked about earlier, augment external partners for services.
Yep.
And then partnering with a bigger MSP at my time who may have qualified leads that didn't fit their realm. Hey, let's broker a good referral agreement. Reach out to the chamber. Go ahead and reach out to an association. Hey, connect me with the IT company that's kind of established themselves here. And you get two directions. Either A, great, we'll connect you with them. And that's what happened with me. Or you may find that, oh, we really don't have anyone here. Well, how do I become that subject matter expert for you and your member base? And let's go ahead and grow together, right? So these are things to kind of take into, but really being mentally strong and having that support is obviously going to be a huge piece, which is going to dive me into my second to last question for you, Chris, is, now you're based in Tomball and you're raising family, right? Mm-hmm. And, while running a company, actually you're running your company now. It was announced that you are running another company inside of the MSP Owners Group portfolio, right? Separate to the MSP Owners Group. How are you, really gaining in, like, how are you finding success in your own terms? How are you making most of your work-life balance, making the time so that you don't get burnt out? You don't get stressed out with the things that are happening inside what me and you are calling organized chaos inside of the last 6 months of so much that's happening here and announcements coming soon from on all fronts. What have you done to really protect yourself mentally, spiritually, along with just yourself and with your family to ensure that that's not affected?
Yeah, I go back to my foundation. Obviously, you said spiritually, right? It falls back for me. Is faith is a huge part of my life, right? And so that's a huge balance. Obviously, that is the driver. My family, it is a balance, but I love it. I thrive in the chaos. I thrive in the high pressure. To me, that's really where it is. And then the second part of that is for my balance, I go to the outdoors. I'm fortunate to live in Texas. I'm born and raised in Colorado. I still have my family there. So I have the ability to get there fairly quickly. I can get there and I can get to my property in 12 hours from my doorstep. So, and I force myself through my faith and my spirituality to take a break regularly. And secondarily, I force myself multiple times a year to completely unplug. And I look forward to those as I get into those highest pressure situations. I often then reflect upon the last journey. Last December, I went to Chile, went down to Patagonia, and went on an adventure down there. And so it is, for me, those are the key things to have. Obviously have a goal, but you said it well. Balance is the key, right? And so I have to know what that is, and you have to create boundaries and be aware of yours. And also, as our new leader and protege likes to say and pick on me about, I'm very much involved, and I do as weird as it is, do a lot of hot yoga. And
hot yoga, baby.
Hot yoga, baby. Downward dog. I do a lot of sweating, and that allows me to completely unplug, typically very early in the morning, and try to get my head right for, as you said, what's to come.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to take that time out. For me, amazing enough, what really recharges me is attending events to be around other MSPs, because for some reason, just seeing the hopefulness, the drive, them really trying to figure out what they want to do, has always been an inspiring thing to me. I've talked to many MSPs that may have just been starting, right? But they're telling me their stories. They're telling me why they got into it. And it just reinvigorates me, right? And I love being able to go there. And I haven't been to an event in a while. So I need to go to one here fairly soon to kind of get that energy, right? And get that going from there. I do love vacationing and being able to separate with my family, especially with my daughter and my wife. I've come to learn the term that there's a difference between traveling and vacation. I like vacationing. And so apparently we were traveling last December is what I found out. So, but and that's a running joke between here in the household. But the goal is that you have to figure out what's going to be the way that you can protect yourself, but protect your mental state and understanding yourself as well. I think sometimes we just run so far ahead and we hit the wall without knowing. And I think it's very important to stay in tune and talking with your colleagues and friends and those that are listening here, making sure that you speak with one another in the community groups, emailing here if you have to, being able to have that venue and that avenue so that you can protect yourself, so that you can give your best as you move forward what you do for services.
Yeah.
Mr. Cool, I got one more question for you, and we're going to go
Yeah.
ahead and round out this episode here. If you were talking to someone like yourself that was back in the University of Colorado days, and you're probably maybe dreaming about, what's the next thing in life, what would be a piece of advice you'd give him or her and everything that you've been through so far?
I think I'm doing it now for my son. My son is a sophomore at Texas A&M, and my steady advice to him always is it sounds corny, but it's to find what you truly love and what you want to do. What makes you click? I was given that ability unbeknownst by my protege. He said, think you would make a really good salesperson. He identified that in me at that time. And I was able to tap into that. It's been a wonderful thing. And so I think it goes back to finding your passion. What do you really love to do? You were talking about your mental health. When I get out of the office and go talk to people, like literally just go on appointments, I don't have to even sell them anything. That started very early for me this morning versus being on a call.
Yeah.
Because my love language is people and selling. So I think it's identifying, and it's interesting you said that about you like to go to events. Anthony, when he was at that event with you in November, was supercharged. That dude was like Superman for like the next 2 months. It carried him through. And so I wonder if that has something to do with our different brains. But I think it's a passion, bro. Follow your passion. It goes back to it.
It's funny, right? And I did that on purpose, and I'll share that here. And I don't think the person who questioned it will mind me telling the story. But again, as I'm now leaning into the new role for MSP Owners Group, so okay, I'll tell this story, and then we'll jump into that story on why I do what I do. So again, mentors and being able to explain to you exactly what it is to help shape you, right? And so I always identify three main mentors of mine. We've already referred to one earlier, which is Don Dubinsky, who helped with the creation of Proudest Text in the early years and things of that nature. But David Nelson, who was the one of the co-owners at the time of Uncle Julio's restaurant chain. Mm-hmm. So serial entrepreneur, knows what he did, account manager at the job that I was at, which was an automotive software firm. And he shared with something, he's Puerto Rican and Irish. And so what he shared with me was like, you have to understand about yourself. He goes, you're good at what you do. He's like, but consistency is your problem. Mm. And so that was something I never understood, because I always was getting, as a young man, I just didn't understand why they were just on my back all the time. I'm like, I'm giving you great results, and I go ahead and slack a little bit, and then I'm going to come back. Why are you giving me shit? And that was the first time that it was equated to words that I now understand that have ingrained into me, where if I'm not consistent, I'm the worst critic of myself, and ensuring that I have to make sure that I consistently provide the results and things that I'm doing at an effortless pace, right? And I lead that into my next mentor, which we all know, whom for many, many years, Mr. Juan Fernandez. And there's a phrase that he said, which is why he had chose me to, or asked me to be in this role, is you have the ability to see in people what they don't see in themselves just yet. There are very few individuals that have that trait. That is something you need to lean into, because you will lose it. And so I never understood what he meant by that, where because there's a follow-up phrase where it's a shame that there are people that don't understand the true potential, because you cannot save the unwilling. And so when I heard these, and as we were conversating, and and I asked him the question like, hey, what made you think to approach me, with his vast network and the amount of people that he knows, he again reiterated and explained to me why he had approached me on being CEO of MSP Owners Group. Now, diving into the story about Anthony coming into the event, there was someone in that we had mentioned. I said, hey, I think it makes sense for those, because when we all had our all teams retreat, when we were down in Clearwater, how my team have been to events, but that some of your members of your team haven't been to events, not because you haven't said, hey, you're not going to events. It just wasn't something that, didn't come to mind. So I said, this is probably a good opportunity for him. It's in your base in Houston. I cleared it with you just to check in. Everything was cool. I said, hey, would you like to go? Let me get you a pass inside. He's like, yeah, I would love to go. And then I was told, hey, I don't know, there's a lot of goals that are and results that we're trying to get at the end of the year. Is it wise for us to pull Anthony away? And I said, it's the reason why you chose me to do this, because I've explained to you, employee experience is going to drive the client experience. And that's how we're going to succeed into this organization. So you chose me to do what I do. This is what I do. Please let me do what I do. And he was like, okay. And you could hear it was a reluctancy, but I knew, because when the ladies from my team go to PAX 8 Beyond, or they go to an event, what they learned that I didn't have the opportunity to teach them in those 12 months, they come back with either questions, knowledge, or skill set that is not internal. So in MSP Owners Group, obviously, we got a lot of initiatives internally of training each other and growing and scaling. But there's something about going into a room with your peers that drive you to become better. And I've learned that from myself and from running MSP Unplugged, that I believe is a necessity. And so to hear you say that Anthony was charged up right after, which was my hope, was to not only motivate him, help reach out to other MSPs. And there were actually MSPs that he knew from meetings that you have had and from other lunch and learns and things of that nature, and grow not only his network, but his opportunity to help drive Cool Technology Group to even further on just new knowledge that was learned, or even down to the point of now he's recharged. Because I mean, it was a crazy 6 months so far that we've had, right? Even further. And so, again, I say all that to go back to, you got to protect yourself. You have to understand where you need, and you have to help those, you got to be a champion where you are internally if you have the opportunity to do so. So, not sure if there was anything else you want to add to that, Chris, but I figure.
No, that's fantastic. That's a good segue. It's funny when you even bring that up, it brings up another story, and how you and I are sitting here today. I was getting ready to go recharge how I go recharge, right? Go to the out of doors. And I was going to take Anthony down to Louisiana and take him tuna fishing.
Nice.
Every once in a while, I'm a sales guy, right? So I like to take cold calls. I think it's fantastic. It's good for me. It's good for maybe it's good for whomever's on the other line. And I get a phone call, and it happens to be from an organization that Juan's in charge of. And they were putting on an event that very weekend, and they said, hey, let us fly you down. And I said, well, of course. They got us down there, right? And so we attended a 2-day event. And, one of the most amazing things that I respect so much about Juan is that his servant heart. He's always trying to make leaders. And in his presentation, for 2 days, they took care of us, wined and dined us. They never once mentioned anything about what they were representing, trying to sell us anything. All that happened during this event was that they would bring different people in to give me advice and Anthony advice about how we could better be a marketer, or what we could do for this tool. Never once was it mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Anthony and I got out of there after 2 days. We didn't even go tuna fishing. We turned around, got right back on an airplane, flew home, and went to work because we were so jazzed.
Yeah.
And also one other thing that it did for us is that it also allowed us to look at the rest of those people, because they're all of us. We're on different stages. We were in year 4. And we recognized that we were doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Because of the way we structured our business. So again, I appreciate you saying that. You are really good at that. I think we've found that. I think it's the different brains. But it's good for me to hear it again, because then it inspires me. Funny enough, I'm potentially going in February to a big event that just happened because of a big lender that I spoke to this morning. So
nice.
Fantastic. Good advice.
Awesome. No, that's great. So Chris, I'm gonna go ahead and round out the show. We got to get you out of here, but I appreciate you jumping on here, sharing your story, us talking like we normally do. We get the opportunity to show the world on how we talk with each other. But if there's anyone that wants to reach out to you, whether they want to find a little bit more about getting into understanding hardware as a service, devices as a service, how to get printer toner in their blood if they want to, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, I would love to help anybody that I possibly can. Please, the copier thing, toner in my blood is part of my world, but I really found my love of finance and what that looks like. So hardware as a service across the board. You and I have worked on a couple deals for servers, for phone systems, where you still have these connectivities. But you can find us at cooltechgroup.com, COOLTECHGROUP.com. Or call us on our landline, 832-810-COOL. That's 832-810-2665. I'd love to help in any way that we possibly can. I love it. To me, it keeps me healthy. So bring it on.
That's awesome. No, yeah, like I said, I think I connected you with my very close friend, Andres Quiros. He was blown away from being able to talk to you. I was just talking to our co-host, Rick Smith, here not too long ago, and he's like, oh, hot damn, man, you got some stuff going on. And I said, man, you know what? You got to talk to Mr. Cool. Mr. Cool is the man. So, wow. And I'm excited for the new announcements that are going to be coming up here soon. Get your flowers on what you got going on your side. There's a lot going on, and I just cannot wait to those tuning in, listening, that are following our journeys to hear a little bit more. But until then, we appreciate all of you tuning in. If you want to see more of this type of content, tune in every week. We're over on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. Like, subscribe, hit the notification button, and you'll be notified when a new episode is available. You can also take us with you on the go. We're on all your favorite podcatcher apps. What podcatcher apps? Head over to mspunplugged.com. You'll see all the icons. So if there's one that's for you, click that bad boy. We got Amazon Music. We got Apple Podcasts, Spotify, to name a few. And also, you know it. You love it. We're coming back with our 6th annual TechCon Unplugged here coming up in the fall. Not revealing the date yet. Not revealing the location. But I promise you, well, the community knows. But if you're not in the community, you should be joining. But if you're not a part of the community group, feel free to make sure to reach out. I'll let you know how to get in there. But ultimately, we will be making that announcement here by the end of the month. And I am excited to share what's the new phase and looking at the new look of TechCon Unplugged. So with that, we appreciate all of you, and we will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.